Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange. Today I want to do another round of recent reads talking about some fantastic science fiction I have been reading. There are two potential favorites in this video, as well as a pretty big disappointment. All that being said, let's get started. First, let's start with the good, and I read a novella called To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This is about a crew that go around and survey exoplanets. In this future, humans have the ability to change or bioengineer our bodies in order to adapt to other planets, as opposed to the process of terraforming planets to meet our current physiology. And the story is basically the crew going around to these various planets, and we get to see how their bodies change, and then them going and exploring the planets below. And I very much enjoyed this one. This, of course, is written by Becky Chambers, who is most well known for her Wayfarer series that starts with A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. And anyone who's a fan of that series will definitely enjoy this one. However, this is unrelated to the series, so you can start here or pick up this book even if you haven't read those other ones. And I do want to point out that while this book is definitely going to appeal to people who enjoy Becky Chambers, it is a little bit different in tone compared to her Wayfarer series and narrative style. So I will say that while her other books are very character focused, this one is more focused on the science aspects. Certainly she does include some moments with the characters, but at its core this is a lot of hard science, which I personally really enjoyed. This is a story that is very optimistic in tone, which is what Becky Chambers is known for, but I like the fact that it felt more balanced in this one as opposed to her Wayfarer series. It does offer a more positive future than a lot of science fiction these days, but at the same time it felt realistic, and I like the fact that it was a little more balanced. I was so immersed in this story. It's not very fast-paced. Becky Chambers honestly isn't known for her narrative drive in her stories, but there was enough of a plot to pull me in, and I just loved that aspect of the hard science. I found myself just reading this so slowly, not because it was slow, but because I wanted to savor all those details. I want to mention that while I'm talking about a lot of hard science, this book is also very accessible to people who normally don't necessarily read a lot of hard science or science fiction in general. I think that Becky Chambers does a really good job of bringing in these ideas, but explaining them really clearly to a lay person. So if you're like myself and don't have a background in science, you can still very much enjoy this one and understand what is going on. I love this one. I thought it was very accessible again, and I think this one will also appeal to people who enjoy Emma Newman's books. It actually reminded me more of her Planetfall series than the Wayfarer series. And if this sounds like the kind of thing you enjoy, I definitely recommend picking it up. If you have never read Becky Chambers, I think this is a perfectly fine place to start with her work. Personally, I actually like this one a little bit better than the Wayfarer series, and that just comes down to personal taste. But if it sounds like the kind of thing you would enjoy, I highly recommend it. This was so much fun, and I would love to see more people checking it out. Next, I want to talk about a short story collection, and that is Saloons and Stardust by Pamela Jeffs. I received a digital copy from the author, and this is a collection of speculative fiction that is primarily science fiction, but it does go into the realm of the fantastical, and there's even a few stories that have little bits of horror, which I always appreciate. The collection is themed around the idea of courageous women. So at the forefront of most of these stories, you have women that are brave and strong and often have to face different kinds of adversity. What I loved so much about this collection was how creative it was. The author took so many different concepts in science fiction and fantasy and brought them together and mashed the different genres in ways that I've never seen done before. So I want to say that this collection was incredibly fun to read, and I really enjoyed the places that it went and was just so much fun. I'm someone who actually doesn't read a lot of short fiction when it comes to science fiction and fantasy. While I love reading short horror, I typically prefer longer things like novels when it comes to the SFF genres, but this was definitely the exception. This worked so well. I loved so many of the stories. As is always the case with collections, I did enjoy certain stories more than others, but for the most part, I loved a lot of the stories in this collection. I do recommend checking out my written review only because I will give you a longer list of my favorite stories and give you some of those thoughts, but I'll let you know here a few of my favorites just to give you an idea of what is in this collection. So the first story in the collection definitely starts it off strong, and this is about an Indigenous woman who is running away from hunters, and this has a Western flair to it. And I should mention that several of the stories blend together science fiction and Western settings, which is one of my favorite mashups to see in any form of media. So I absolutely love that. This one had some really cool technology in it and a fantastic strong ending, and I just loved it. The second story in the collection was equally strong, and that is about a woman that is hunting whales. However, the whalers of the past have killed off the whales. So instead of hunting the living, she is actually hunting the dead. And it was just beautiful and haunting. Of course, it had environmental themes, but it never felt heavy-handed. And I very much enjoyed that one as well. There were just so many stories in the collection that brought together ideas I've never seen put together that way before. There were stories about pirates and vampires and werewolves and all of these really cool concepts. And I feel like I keep using the words fun and cool to describe this collection, but I don't want to sell the author short because I also want to say that her writing was excellent. She is definitely a master of her craft because I thought the stories were all incredibly well written and also really smart. I think she has a lot of really good things to say, and there's a lot of really interesting messages that come across in her stories. So if that sounds like the kind of thing you would enjoy, which honestly I think would appeal to most science fiction fantasy readers, I highly recommend this collection. I had a blast reading it, and it's definitely one that I can see myself revisiting in the future. I would love to see a lot of these stories expanded into novels, not because they were too short, but simply because I like the ideas so much and I just wanted to spend more time in those worlds that she created. So if you enjoy everything from zombies to aliens to pirates, etc., or any of those things in between, I definitely recommend checking this one out. Even if you don't think you enjoy short stories when it comes to science fiction, this is very much the exception, and I cannot recommend it enough. So I would love for more people to check out that one as well. Finally, let's talk about Salvaged by Madeleine Roux, and this is one I received from the publisher. This follows a woman who is working as a salvager because she wants to get away from her family business. In this world, she basically works as a space janitor, and the story follows her working a job where she is sent to clean up a spaceship where everyone is supposedly dead. However, when she gets there, things are not so simple, and things go from there into a possible horror story. And this was one of my most anticipated releases for the year, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that while this is a piece of science fiction, it also blends together elements of my other favorite genre, horror. And I liked pieces of this, but for whatever reason, I just found this book to be underwhelming. And I really am trying to put my thoughts together in a way to explain this to you so that you can decide if it's going to work for you. I think that the writing was fine. It definitely felt like an adult novel, not a young adult novel. So I do think she accomplished that, and it was marketed to the right audience. But I just never became attached to the main character, and I think that is such an important piece of this story. She just reminded me of a lot of those snarky female characters that I have read a lot. She reminded me a tiny bit of the main character from Artemis by Andy Weir, and that's not a great comparison. I just found her to be a little bit flat, and because I wasn't attached to the characters, it made it that much harder to be attached to the story, and I just struggled to get immersed. Eventually, when the horror aspects of this book did emerge, I did like the story more and got more intrigued because the horror elements honestly were pretty cool, but it wasn't enough to make this a very exciting or again immersive read. So for me, this was a letdown, not a bad book, but just an average piece of science fiction with some cool horror elements to it. So not one I personally recommend, but keep in mind that everyone's tastes are different, so maybe other people will enjoy this one more than I did. So that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I would love to hear your comments down below. Have I enticed you to check out any of these books? If you've already read them, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, as long as you keep them spoiler free. Otherwise, consider like, commenting, and subscribing, as well as hitting that little bell notification, which will let you know when I post new videos. As always, thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.